Isabella was a young woman with a spirit full of dreams and a heart burdened with the weight of her family's struggles. Born and raised in a small farming town, Isabella had always been aware of the sacrifices her parents made to provide for her and her siblings. Her father worked tirelessly in the fields, while her mother managed the household with the little they had. Despite their modest means, they were a family bound by love and resilience. From a young age, Isabella knew that education was her key to a better future. She was an exceptional student, known for her sharp mind and unwavering determination. Her teachers often praised her, predicting a bright future for the girl with big dreams. But the path to success was fraught with obstacles. As the eldest daughter, Isabella felt a deep sense of responsibility toward her family. The farm had always been a source of pride, but it was also a source of constant worry. Bad weather, crop failures, and the rising costs of living made it difficult for her parents to make ends meet. Isabella often overheard her parents discussing the possibility of selling the farm, a prospect that filled her with dread. She couldn't bear the thought of her family losing everything they had worked so hard to build. Determined to change her family's fortunes, Isabella set her sights on attending college. She was accepted into a prestigious university in the city, where she would study business administration. It was an exciting but daunting prospect. The city was a world away from the quiet, rural life she had known. But Isabella was not one to shy away from challenges. She knew that this was her chance to learn the skills she needed to help her family and build a better life. The transition from farm life to city life was not easy. Isabella found herself in a bustling metropolis, surrounded by people and places she had never imagined. The pace was fast and the expectations were high, but Isabella was determined to succeed. She threw herself into her studies with the same tenacity that had carried her through high school. She spent long hours in the library, poring over textbooks and working on assignments. She knew that every grade counted, every test was a step closer to her goal. But college was expensive, and Isabella's scholarship only covered part of her tuition. Her parents could not afford to send her money regularly, and she refused to burden them with more financial stress. So, Isabella took on a job at a local diner, working late into the night after classes. The work was hard and the hours were long, but Isabella was grateful for the opportunity to support herself. She balanced her job and her studies, often sacrificing sleep to keep up with her responsibilities. Despite the challenges, Isabella excelled in her studies. She was driven by a deep-seated determination to succeed, not just for herself but for her family. She knew that her success was their success, that her education was the key to lifting them out of poverty. Her professors took notice of her dedication and often praised her for her insightful contributions in class. But while her academic achievements were commendable, the toll of her double life began to show. Isabella was often exhausted, her eyes heavy with the weight of her responsibilities. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, when the enormity of what she was trying to accomplish threatened to crush her spirit. But in those moments of doubt, she would think of her family, of her parents who had given everything to provide for her, and she would find the strength to keep going. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Isabella's life settled into a rhythm of study, work, and little sleep. She became accustomed to the late nights at the diner, the endless hours of studying, and the constant pressure to succeed. But the weight of her responsibilities grew heavier with each passing day. Isabella's job at the diner was demanding. She worked the evening shift, which often stretched into the early hours of the morning. The pay was modest, but it was enough to cover her rent and a portion of her tuition. The work was tiring, but Isabella was grateful for the income. She knew that without it, she would not be able to continue her studies. Her job at the diner also exposed her to a side of life she had never known. The customers were a diverse group, ranging from weary travelers to late-night workers like herself. Some were friendly, offering a kind word or a generous tip, while others were impatient and demanding. Isabella learned to handle the challenges with grace, developing a thick skin and a warm smile that masked her exhaustion. But the late nights took their toll. Isabella would often return to her small apartment in the early hours of the morning, her feet aching and her mind clouded with fatigue. She would collapse into bed, only to wake a few hours later to start another day. Her classmates would sometimes comment on the dark circles under her eyes, but Isabella would brush off their concerns with a smile. Despite her fatigue, Isabella never let her studies suffer. She continued to excel in her classes, often earning the highest grades in her courses. Her professors were impressed by her dedication and hard work, but they had no idea of the struggles she faced outside of the classroom. Isabella never spoke of her job or the financial pressure she was under. She didn't want anyone's pity or sympathy. She wanted to succeed on her own terms. But the strain of balancing work and study began to affect her health. Isabella often felt run down, her immune system weakened by the lack of sleep and constant stress. She would catch colds easily, and there were days when she struggled to get out of bed. But she pushed through, knowing that she couldn't afford to miss work or fall behind in her studies. The challenges she faced only strengthened her resolve. Isabella knew that she was working towards something greater, that her sacrifices would one day pay off. She kept her eyes on the prize, determined to achieve her goals no matter the cost. The years passed in a blur of hard work and determination. Isabella's college career was marked by academic excellence, and she became known as one of the top students in her program. She earned the respect of her professors and classmates alike, not just for her intelligence, but for her work ethic and dedication. As graduation approached, Isabella felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had worked so hard to reach this point, but the future was uncertain. She knew that she needed to find a good job, not just for herself, but for her family. Her parents were proud of her achievements, but they were also counting on her to help support them. The job market was competitive, and Isabella knew that she would have to stand out to secure a position in the city. She spent hours perfecting her resume, highlighting her academic achievements and the skills she had developed through her work at the diner. She also reached out to her professors for letters of recommendation, knowing that their support could make a difference. Isabella's hard work paid off. Shortly after graduation, she was offered a position at a luxurious company in the city. The company was known for its high standards and prestigious clientele, and Isabella was thrilled to have the opportunity to work there. It was a dream come true, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Her parents were overjoyed when she called to tell them the news. They had always believed in her, but they knew how difficult the journey had been. Isabella promised them that she would continue to work hard and that she would help them in any way she could. Her mother cried tears of joy, knowing that their daughter's success was also their success. Isabella's first day at the company was both exciting and nerve-wracking. The office was a world away from the diner where she had worked during college. The building was sleek and modern, with glass walls and polished floors. The employees were impeccably dressed, moving through the halls with a sense of purpose. Isabella felt a surge of pride as she stepped through the doors, knowing that she had earned her place here. Her new role was challenging, but Isabella was up to the task. She was eager to learn and quickly adapted to the fast-paced environment. She worked closely with her colleagues, soaking up as much knowledge as she could. Her attention to detail and ability to think on her feet made her a valuable asset to the team. Isabella's work ethic did not go unnoticed. Her supervisors were impressed by her dedication and often praised her for her contributions. She was given more responsibilities, which she handled with grace and efficiency. Isabella was determined to prove herself, not just to her employers, but to herself. She wanted to show that she could succeed in this new environment, that she could achieve the life she had always dreamed of. As Isabella settled into her new job, she remained focused on her work. She was determined to make a name for herself in the company, to prove that she was more than just a fresh graduate. Her hard work and dedication quickly made her stand out, and she gained the respect of her colleagues and supervisors alike. But there was one person in the company who took a special interest in Isabella, Mr. Rodriguez, the CEO. Mr. Rodriguez was a man of wealth and power, known for his sharp business acumen and his charm. He was also known as a bachelor, a man who had never settled down despite the many women who vied for his attention. Mr. Rodriguez was used to being surrounded by people who were impressed by his wealth and status. But Isabella was different. She was focused on her work, driven by her own goals and ambitions. She didn't seek his approval, or try to win his favor. In fact, she seemed completely unaware of the effect she had on him. It was this very quality that intrigued Mr. Rodriguez. He admired Isabella's work ethic, her intelligence, and her kindness. He watched as she interacted with her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand or offer a kind word. He saw the way she handled challenges with grace and determination, never losing her composure even in the most stressful situations. Mr. Rodriguez found himself drawn to Isabella, not just for her beauty, but for the person she was. He admired her from afar, unsure of how to approach her without crossing professional boundaries. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but he also couldn't ignore the growing feelings he had for her. Isabella, on the other hand, was completely unaware of Mr. Rodriguez's interest. She was focused on her work, determined to continue proving herself. She appreciated the opportunities she had been given and was grateful for the positive feedback she received from her supervisors. But she didn't give much thought to her personal life. She had never been one to seek out romantic relationships, preferring to focus on her goals. But Mr. Rodriguez couldn't stop thinking about her. He would find himself watching her during meetings, noticing the way she spoke with confidence and poise. He admired the way she handled difficult situations, always finding a solution that worked for everyone involved. He began to wonder if there was a way to get to know her better, to see if the feelings he had for her were mutual. One day, Mr. Rodriguez found himself in a meeting with Isabella and several other employees. They were discussing an important project, and Isabella was leading the presentation. As she spoke, Mr. Rodriguez couldn't help but be impressed by her knowledge and confidence. She had a natural ability to command a room, to engage everyone in the discussion. After the meeting, Mr. Rodriguez approached Isabella. "That was an excellent presentation, Isabella," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You have a real talent for this." Isabella smiled, pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez," she replied. "I'm just doing my best." Mr. Rodriguez nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Keep up the good work," he said before turning to leave. Isabella watched him go, feeling a sense of pride in her accomplishments. She had always respected Mr. Rodriguez as a leader, but she had never considered the possibility that he might see her as anything more than just another employee. The thought never crossed her mind as she returned to her work, determined to continue proving herself in the company. As the months went by, Isabella's responsibilities at the company continued to grow. She was given more challenging tasks and projects, all of which she handled with her characteristic determination and skill. Her colleagues admired her work ethic, and she quickly became one of the most trusted members of the team. But with greater responsibilities came longer hours. Isabella often found herself staying late at the office, working on important projects that needed to be completed by the next day. She didn't mind the extra work. She saw it as an opportunity to prove herself even further. One evening, Isabella was working late on an important presentation that Mr. Rodriguez needed for a meeting the next day. She was focused on her work, her mind completely absorbed in the task at hand. The office was quiet, with most of the employees having gone home for the night. As she worked, she didn't notice that Mr. Rodriguez was still in his office, working late as well. He had been keeping an eye on Isabella from his office, impressed by her dedication. He knew how hard she worked, and he admired her for it. It was getting late, and Isabella was starting to feel the effects of the long day. She stretched in her chair, glancing at the clock. It was well past midnight, and she knew that the buses would stop running soon. She needed to finish her work and get home before it was too late. As she was finishing up, she heard a voice behind her. "Are you done?" Isabella jumped, startled by the sudden sound. She turned to see Mr. Rodriguez standing in the doorway, a small smile on his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his tone apologetic. Isabella laughed, her heart still racing from the surprise. "It's okay, Mr. Rodriguez. I just didn't expect anyone else to be here." Mr. Rodriguez stepped into the room, his eyes warm as he looked at her. "I couldn't leave you here alone, especially at this hour. I know how late the buses stop running, and I didn't want you to be stranded." Isabella felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, but I was planning to take a taxi. You didn't have to stay." Mr. Rodriguez shook his head. "Nonsense. I'll drive you home. It's the least I can do after all the hard work you've done for the company." Isabella was taken aback by his offer. She had never expected her boss to be so considerate. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother." "You're not a bother at all," Mr. Rodriguez replied, his tone firm but kind. "Let me take you home." Without waiting for her to respond, Mr. Rodriguez took her bag and led the way to the parking area. Isabella followed, still processing what had just happened. She was used to being independent, to handling things on her own, but she couldn't deny that it felt nice to have someone looking out for her. As they drove through the quiet city streets, Mr. Rodriguez turned to her. "Thank you for all your hard work, Isabella. The company wouldn't be where it is today without you." Isabella smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "It's my pleasure, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm just doing my job." When they arrived at her apartment, Mr. Rodriguez quickly got out of the car to open the door for her. Isabella was touched by the gesture, and she smiled up at him as she stepped out of the car. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I really appreciate this." Mr. Rodriguez returned her smile, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "Be safe, Isabella, and don't hesitate to call if you ever need anything." Isabella nodded, her heart fluttering at the kindness in his voice. "Thank you. You drive safe too." They exchanged one last smile before Mr. Rodriguez got back in his car and drove away. As Isabella walked up to her apartment, she couldn't help but feel that something had changed between them. She didn't know what it was, but she knew that she would think about this night for a long time to come. The following weeks after Mr. Rodriguez's late-night gesture passed in a whirlwind of work and routine for Isabella. She continued to excel in her job, earning the admiration of her colleagues and the respect of her superiors. Yet, in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the memory of that night when Mr. Rodriguez had driven her home. The warmth in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes. It was as if a different side of him had been revealed, one that was compassionate and caring. But for Mr. Rodriguez, the encounter had stirred up something deeper. Despite his successful exterior, there was a hidden pain that he carried with him, a wound that had never fully healed. His wealth and status had come at a cost, one that he rarely spoke of, even to those closest to him. Behind the powerful and confident facade was a man who had suffered a great loss, one that had shaped his life and his approach to relationships. Years ago, Mr. Rodriguez had been engaged to a woman named Elena, the love of his life. Elena had been beautiful, intelligent, and full of life. She had brought joy and light into his world, and he had planned to spend the rest of his life with her. But fate had other plans. On the day they were supposed to be married, Elena had been in a car accident that claimed her life. The shock and grief of losing her had been overwhelming. Mr. Rodriguez had thrown himself into his work, using it as a way to cope with the pain. But the void that Elena left behind had never been filled. In the years that followed, Mr. Rodriguez became known as a successful businessman and a bachelor. He had dated other women, but none of them had ever come close to capturing his heart the way Elena had. He kept people at a distance, wary of opening himself up to the possibility of being hurt again. But when he met Isabella, something changed. There was something about her that reminded him of Elena, not just her beauty, but her kindness, her strength, and her resilience. Mr. Rodriguez found himself drawn to Isabella in a way he hadn't been drawn to anyone in years. He admired her work ethic, her intelligence, and her ability to handle challenges with grace. But more than that, he admired the person she was: honest, caring, and selfless. As he watched her navigate the challenges of her job, he began to see in her the qualities that he had loved in Elena. It was a realization that both excited and terrified him. Despite his growing feelings for Isabella, Mr. Rodriguez struggled with the idea of opening his heart again. He knew that getting close to her meant risking the possibility of pain and loss, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for that. But as the days went by, he found it harder and harder to keep his distance. Isabella had become a part of his life in a way that he hadn't expected, and he couldn't deny the connection he felt with her. Isabella's hard work and dedication at the company did not go unnoticed. Her ability to take on challenging projects, her innovative ideas, and her leadership qualities had caught the attention of the upper management. Her reputation as a rising star in the company grew, and it wasn't long before she was offered a promotion. The promotion came as a surprise to Isabella. She had been working diligently, but she hadn't expected to be recognized in such a significant way so soon. The new position would come with more responsibilities, a higher salary, and the opportunity to work more closely with Mr. Rodriguez and the executive team. It was everything she had worked for, and more. When Mr. Rodriguez called her into his office to deliver the news, Isabella was both excited and nervous. She had always admired Mr. Rodriguez for his leadership and vision, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease around him since that night he had driven her home. She wasn't sure what to make of the connection she felt with him, and she was worried that it might complicate their professional relationship. "Isabella, I want to congratulate you on your promotion," Mr. Rodriguez said, his tone warm and sincere. "You've proven yourself to be an invaluable asset to this company, and we're lucky to have you." "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez," Isabella replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm honored by the opportunity." Mr. Rodriguez smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made Isabella's heart skip a beat. "You've earned it, Isabella. Your dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed. I'm confident that you'll excel in your new role." Isabella felt a surge of pride at his words, but she also felt a flicker of something else, something she couldn't quite put into words. She was grateful for the promotion, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mr. Rodriguez's interest in her than just her work. As she left his office, Isabella couldn't help but wonder what the future held. She was determined to continue doing her best in her new role, but she couldn't ignore the growing tension between her and Mr. Rodriguez. She knew that she needed to keep her focus on her work, but she also knew that it was only a matter of time before she would have to confront the feelings that were beginning to surface. As Isabella settled into her new role, she found herself working more closely with Mr. Rodriguez. The nature of her promotion required frequent meetings and discussions with him, and she quickly became one of his most trusted advisors. Despite her initial nervousness, Isabella excelled in her new position. She was able to contribute valuable insights to the company's strategic decisions, and her leadership skills continued to shine. However, as she spent more time with Mr. Rodriguez, the tension between them grew. There was an unspoken connection that neither of them could ignore, but both were hesitant to acknowledge. For Isabella, it was a confusing mix of admiration, respect, and something deeper that she wasn't ready to admit. For Mr. Rodriguez, it was a struggle between his growing feelings for Isabella and the pain of his past. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Mr. Rodriguez asked Isabella to join him for a private dinner in his office. He explained that they needed to discuss some important matters related to the company, but Isabella couldn't help but feel that there was more to it than just business. As they sat down to eat, the atmosphere was different from their usual meetings. The office was quiet, the city lights twinkling in the background, and there was a sense of intimacy that made Isabella's heart race. They discussed work, but the conversation soon shifted to more personal topics. "Isabella," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice softening, "I want you to know how much I admire you. You've accomplished so much in such a short time, and I've seen the way you handle everything with such grace and strength. It's inspiring." Isabella looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. That means a lot coming from you." Mr. Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "There's something I need to tell you, something I've been holding back for a long time." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She could sense the seriousness in his tone, and she knew that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "Years ago, I lost someone very dear to me," Mr. Rodriguez began, his voice tinged with sadness. "Her name was Elena, and she was the love of my life. We were engaged to be married, but she died in a car accident just days before our wedding." Isabella's eyes widened in shock. She had never known this about Mr. Rodriguez, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "I've spent years trying to move on, but the truth is, I've never been able to fully let go of her," Mr. Rodriguez continued. "I've kept people at a distance, afraid of getting close to anyone again. But when I met you, Isabella, something changed. You remind me so much of Elena. Your kindness, your strength, your determination. I found myself drawn to you in a way I haven't felt in a long time." Isabella was speechless. She had always admired Mr. Rodriguez, but she had never imagined that he felt this way about her. "I know this is unexpected, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But I had to tell you how I feel. I don't want to keep hiding my feelings from you, but I also understand if you don't feel the same way." Isabella's mind was racing. She had never considered the possibility of a romantic relationship with Mr. Rodriguez. But now that he had confessed his feelings, she couldn't deny the connection she felt with him. She had always respected and admired him, but there was something deeper, something she hadn't been willing to acknowledge until now. "Mr. Rodriguez," Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm honored that you would share something so personal with me. I've always respected you, and I've always looked up to you as a leader. But I never imagined that you would see me in this way." Mr. Rodriguez looked at her, his eyes searching for some sign of what she was feeling. "And now that you know, how do you feel?" Isabella took a deep breath, trying to sort through the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I don't know, to be honest. I've always focused on my work, on achieving my goals, and I've never really thought about us in that way. But I can't deny that I feel something for you, something that I can't quite put into words." Mr. Rodriguez's expression softened, and he reached out to gently take her hand. "I don't want to rush you, Isabella. I just needed you to know how I feel. Whatever you decide, I will respect your wishes." Isabella nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that this was a pivotal moment, one that could change the course of her life. But for now, she needed time to process everything, to figure out what she truly wanted. "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez," Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need some time to think." Mr. Rodriguez smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, no matter what you decide." As the dinner ended and Isabella left the office, she couldn't help but feel that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Isabella. Mr. Rodriguez's confession had left her shaken, and she found herself constantly replaying their conversation in her mind. She had always admired him as a leader and a mentor, but the idea of a romantic relationship with him was something she had never considered. Now that the possibility was on the table, she didn't know what to do. Isabella threw herself into her work, hoping to distract herself from the turmoil inside her. She continued to excel in her new role, impressing her colleagues and earning the respect of the executive team. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on her job, she couldn't escape the thoughts of Mr. Rodriguez and the feelings that were beginning to surface. The more she thought about him, the more conflicted she became. On one hand, she couldn't deny the connection she felt with him. He was kind, intelligent, and compassionate, and she admired the way he had overcome his past to become the successful leader he was today. But on the other hand, she was hesitant to enter into a relationship with her boss. She worried about the impact it could have on her career and the potential complications it could bring. Isabella sought advice from her closest friends, hoping that they could offer some clarity. But even as they listened and gave their opinions, she knew that the decision ultimately rested with her. She was the one who had to decide what she wanted, and it wasn't an easy choice. As the days turned into weeks, Isabella found herself avoiding Mr. Rodriguez. She knew that he was giving her space to make her decision, but she also knew that he was waiting for an answer. Every time she saw him in the office, she felt a pang of guilt for keeping him in suspense. But she couldn't bring herself to confront him, not until she had figured out what she truly wanted. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Isabella found herself wandering through the city, lost in thought. The streets were quiet, the shops were closing, and the cool night air did little to calm the storm inside her. She thought about all the sacrifices she had made to get to where she was, the countless hours she had spent working to prove herself. She thought about the dreams she had for her future, the goals she had set for herself. And then she thought about Mr. Rodriguez, the man who had become such a significant part of her life, the man who had opened his heart to her despite his painful past. She couldn't deny that she felt something for him, something deep and real. But was it enough? Could she risk everything she had worked for on a chance at love? As she walked, Isabella found herself in front of the small park where she had often gone to think and clear her mind. She sat down on a bench, her thoughts still racing. The decision she faced was one that would affect not just her career, but her entire life. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was no easy answer. After weeks of inner turmoil, Isabella finally reached a decision. It wasn't an easy choice, but she knew that she couldn't keep avoiding the situation any longer. She needed to confront Mr. Rodriguez and tell him how she felt. One evening, after most of the employees had left the office, Isabella knocked on Mr. Rodriguez's door. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew that this was something she had to do. "Come in," Mr. Rodriguez called from inside. Isabella opened the door and stepped into his office, her nerves on edge. Mr. Rodriguez looked up from his work, his expression softening when he saw her. "Isabella," he said, his voice gentle. "What can I do for you?" Isabella took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how you feel." Mr. Rodriguez nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. And Isabella hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "I've always respected and admired you, Mr. Rodriguez. You've been a mentor to me, and I've learned so much from you. But I also can't deny that I feel something more, something deeper. And that's what's been so confusing for me. I've worked so hard to get to where I am, and I don't want to do anything that could jeopardize my career." Mr. Rodriguez's expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I understand, Isabella. Your career is important to you, and I would never want to do anything to interfere with that." Isabella nodded, grateful for his understanding. "But I also can't ignore the feelings I have for you. You've become such an important part of my life, and I care about you more than I ever thought possible." Mr. Rodriguez's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Isabella could see the emotions swirling in his gaze. The hope, the uncertainty, the vulnerability. She knew that this was just as difficult for him as it was for her. "Isabella," Mr. Rodriguez said finally, his voice filled with emotion, "I've been in love with you for a long time. But I also know that your happiness and success come first. If being with me would cause you any harm or regret, I would rather keep my distance than risk losing you." Isabella's heart swelled at his words, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had never expected him to be so selfless, so willing to put her needs before his own. "I don't want to lose you either," Isabella whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "But I also don't want to live my life wondering what might have been. I'm willing to take a chance to see where this goes. But we need to be careful to make sure that it doesn't affect our work or our professional relationship." Mr. Rodriguez reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll take it one step at a time, Isabella. I promise you, we'll make this work." Isabella smiled through her tears, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew that they could find a way to navigate their relationship while still maintaining their professionalism. It was a new beginning, one that held both challenges and possibilities. As they sat together in the quiet office, holding hands, Isabella knew that she had made the right decision. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face it with Mr. Rodriguez by her side. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope and excitement for the future. A future that she would build not just for herself, but for the man she had come to love. After their heartfelt conversation, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez began navigating their newfound relationship with a blend of caution and excitement. They agreed to keep their romance private, at least for the time being, to avoid any complications at work. But outside the office, they allowed their connection to flourish. Their relationship was marked by small moments of tenderness. A quiet dinner at a secluded restaurant, a stroll through the park where they could be themselves, an evening spent talking about their dreams and fears. Isabella found herself falling more in love with Mr. Rodriguez with each passing day. His warmth, kindness, and wisdom captivated her, while he was equally enamored by her strength, intelligence, and compassion. As they grew closer, they shared more about their lives and their pasts. Mr. Rodriguez opened up about the pain of losing Elena and the fear of allowing himself to love again. Isabella listened with empathy, offering comfort and reassurance. She shared her own struggles and the challenges she had faced in her career, and Mr. Rodriguez was always there to support and encourage her. Their love blossomed in the most unexpected way, growing stronger with each new experience they shared. They found joy in the simplest things: cooking together, enjoying a quiet evening at home, or taking weekend trips to the countryside. For the first time in years, Mr. Rodriguez felt a sense of peace and happiness that he hadn't thought possible after Elena's death. Isabella, too, felt a deep contentment, knowing that she had found a partner who loved and respected her for who she was. As the months passed, Mr. Rodriguez knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Isabella. He had found in her not just a partner, but a soulmate, someone who understood him, loved him, and made him want to be a better man. The decision to propose came naturally, and he began planning a way to make it a moment they would both remember forever. He chose a beautiful, secluded spot in the countryside, a place they had visited together on one of their weekend trips. It was a place where they had shared laughter and love, a place that held special memories for both of them. He arranged for a private dinner under the stars, with twinkling lights and soft music, setting the perfect romantic atmosphere. As they sat down to dinner, Isabella sensed that something was different. Mr. Rodriguez seemed both excited and nervous, and she couldn't help but wonder what was on his mind. They enjoyed a delicious meal, talking and laughing as they always did, but she noticed that he kept glancing at her with a look that was both loving and intense. Finally, after dessert had been served, Mr. Rodriguez stood up and walked over to Isabella's side. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. And as he knelt down on one knee, Isabella's heart began to race. "Isabella," Mr. Rodriguez began, his voice filled with emotion. "From the moment I met you, you changed my life in ways I never expected. You brought light back into my world, a light that I thought I had lost forever. You've shown me what it means to love again, and I can't imagine my life without you by my side." Isabella felt tears welling up in her eyes as she listened to his heartfelt words. She had never imagined that this moment would come, but now that it was here, it felt like a dream come true. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Mr. Rodriguez asked, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring that sparkled in the candlelight. Isabella's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the ring, then at the man she loved more than anything. There was no doubt in her mind about her answer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." Mr. Rodriguez's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood up, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with all the love and passion he felt. It was a moment of pure happiness, a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As they held each other under the starry sky, both of them knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be, with each other forever. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with excitement and anticipation. Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez worked together to plan a celebration that would reflect their love and the journey they had taken to get to this point. They decided on an elegant, intimate ceremony with close family and friends, held at the same countryside spot where Mr. Rodriguez had proposed. Isabella threw herself into the wedding preparations, choosing a beautiful gown, selecting flowers, and working with a caterer to design a menu that would delight their guests. Mr. Rodriguez, ever the thoughtful partner, made sure that every detail was perfect, wanting the day to be as special for Isabella as it was for him. On the day of the wedding, the sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Isabella looked breathtaking in her wedding gown, her eyes shining with happiness as she walked down the aisle. Mr. Rodriguez, waiting for her at the altar, couldn't take his eyes off her, his heart filled with love and admiration. As they stood together, exchanging vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez promised to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, their voices steady and full of emotion. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, they shared a kiss that sealed their commitment to each other, a kiss that was met with cheers and applause from their loved ones. The reception that followed was a joyous celebration of love, laughter, and new beginnings. Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez danced together under the stars, surrounded by the people who mattered most to them. They were overwhelmed with happiness, knowing that they had found in each other a love that was true and lasting. As the night drew to a close, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez slipped away from the festivities, hand in hand. They walked through the gardens, savoring the quiet moments together. They talked about their future, about the life they would build together, and about the family they hoped to start. For both of them, the day had been everything they had dreamed of and more. It was the start of a new adventure, one that they would embark on together, with love as their guide. After their wedding, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez settled into their new life as husband and wife. They moved into a beautiful home that they had chosen together, a place where they could start their family and create new memories. It was a home filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a bright future. Isabella continued to excel in her career, with Mr. Rodriguez's unwavering support. They found a balance between their professional lives and their personal relationship, making sure that their love for each other always came first. They faced challenges together, but their love and commitment to each other only grew stronger with each obstacle they overcame. As the years passed, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez welcomed the arrival of their first child, a beautiful baby girl who brought even more joy into their lives. They named her Elena, in honor of Mr. Rodriguez's late fiancé, a gesture that Isabella suggested, knowing how much it would mean to her husband. Mr. Rodriguez was deeply touched by Isabella's thoughtfulness, and he knew that he had married a woman with a heart as big as her love for him. Their family continued to grow, with the arrival of a son a few years later. Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez embraced their roles as parents with the same love and dedication that they had shown to each other. Their home was filled with the sounds of laughter, the pitter-patter of little feet, and the warmth of a family bound by love. Despite the demands of their careers, they always made time for each other and their children. They traveled together, exploring new places and creating lasting memories. They supported each other's dreams and aspirations, knowing that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. Their love story became the foundation of a life filled with happiness, fulfillment, and deep, abiding love. They faced life's challenges with grace and resilience, always knowing that they could rely on each other no matter what came their way. Happily ever after, as the years went by, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez grew old together, their love only deepening with time. They watched their children grow into kind, successful adults, and they took pride in the life they had built together. Their home was always filled with love, with family gatherings and celebrations that brought everyone together. Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez often reflected on the journey that had brought them to where they were. They remembered the challenges they had faced, the risks they had taken, and the love that had sustained them through it all. They knew that their love story was a rare and precious gift, one that they never took for granted. As they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset on another beautiful day, Mr. Rodriguez took Isabella's hand in his, just as he had done so many years ago when he proposed. They shared a smile, a look of contentment that spoke volumes about the life they had lived together. "We've had a good life, haven't we?" Isabella said, her voice soft and full of love. Mr. Rodriguez nodded, his eyes filled with the same love and admiration he had felt for her since the day they met. "The best life, Isabella, and it's all because of you." Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his love enveloping her. "I'm so glad we took that chance," she whispered. "I wouldn't trade this life for anything." Mr. Rodriguez kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Neither would I, my love. Neither would I." And so, Isabella and Mr. Rodriguez lived out their days in the comfort of each other's love, surrounded by the family they had built together. Their love story was one of joy, resilience, and enduring commitment, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. They had found their happily ever after, and it was everything they had ever dreamed it could be. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.